Salvete omnes, and welcome back to another video here on ScholaLatinae. I'm Giambrone, and today we are looking at etymology, which I like to call the study of truth. And etymology is actually my favorite language topic, so I'm really excited for today's video. So first off, you might be wondering, what even is etymology? And so here we have a little chart here. And etymology, as you can see, is derived from the Greek uh, etymos, meaning true, and logia, meaning study of. And so that's why I called it the study of truth. Because, I mean, if you look at the etymology of the word, it really is the study of truth. Um, and so, we're studying why are our words the way they are? Why does etymology mean the study of truth? Like how did those words come from those languages down to English? And so welcome to this journey of roots and derivatives and truth. And so yeah, again, this is from this website Etymonline, which I'll talk more about later. Let me turn on my laser pointer. It's the online etymology dictionary. And so in our introduction to language video, I showed you this tree, and we pointed out English and Greek and Latin on this Indo-European tree. And so etymology looks less at those individual circles and more of the arrows from one language to another and how the words are changing as they come from Latin into English, from Greek into English. And so you might be wondering, why does it matter? And there's a couple of reasons. First off, if you're trying to wonder, like etymology, like we said in the title, actually means the study of truth. We're going to find out why it means that. It also helps, especially if you're trying to learn more about English or about other languages. You will have a real leg up in understanding more difficult vocabulary, right? If you know the meanings of common roots, you have a lot easier time learning a new language if you already know the meanings of common roots. For example, I did Latin from kindergarten through sixth grade. In seventh and eighth grade, I took Spanish because no Latin was offered at that school. But because of my knowledge of how Latin roots work and kind of those bases, I was able to pick up Spanish a lot more easily by studying this. So let's get some terms down so that we all know what we're talking about. First off, etymology, study of truth, all that. It's the broad field. Also, you can say like, what is the etymology of insert word, and that is specifically the word's origin there. Then I have mentioned roots and derivatives. Don't worry, neither of these are related to calculus if that's not your forte. You say a root is derived, a word is derived from its root, and that the root, right, there's a derivation that goes to the derivative. And two words are said to be cognate if they're in different languages, but they share the same root. So we have an example, verbum, which means word in Latin, and word, which means word in English, are both from this pi root vere. And so they're cognates there. Watch out for false friends, though. For example, habeo, which means to have in Latin, and have, which means to have in English, aren't actually related at all. English have is more related to Latin capio, which kind of means more to like snatch or seize or grab. And habeo is just unrelated. And then related to a cognate, but slightly different, is what's known as a doublet. And doublet, they have to be in the same language. So for example, we have fashion and faction are both from Latin factio, ultimately from facio, which means to do or make. And of course, what's fun is all of these terms have their own etymologies too, right? Derivative is from Latin rivus, which means river. You think about this whole etymological river that a word flows down through hundreds and thousands of years to get to its modern language. It's very poetical. Cognate is from nascor, to be born. It's literally a two words that are born together. That's the prefix there means. It's together, even though they're in different languages. False friends from follow, to deceive, because they're deceiving you. And doublet from duo two should make sense as well, as there are two of them. And so a good amount of you are probably familiar with or a part of, or at least have heard of the JCL, which stands for Junior Classical League. And the JCL is a organization that that focuses on promoting the study of Greek, Latin, and ancient cultures in high school. And so junior, classical, and league all do derive from Latin. So let's look at those. Junior is from junior. Juvenis means young or young person. And so that's how you know that the junior classical league is meant for youths, which is why it's aimed towards high schoolers. There is a senior classical league, and senior, as you can see, comes ultimately from senex, which means old or old man. And that's because once you become old, which is according to the senior classical league, when you enter college, you can join that organization. Classical, I actually really like it. It comes from classicus, right? But classis is originally like their tax brackets. Servius Tullius was dividing the Romans into classes for the purpose of taxation, but also for the purpose of record keeping, and I believe he did the census as well. But these kind of groups of Romans then transferred its meaning to like just Roman antiquity in general, classical studies, the ancient world, which is interesting. And league is ultimately from ligo, which means to bind. Ligo is also where you get things like ligature. If you play a woodwind instrument, you have a ligature around your mouthpiece to keep the reed on there. And yeah, if you've read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, not the same league, unfortunately. And additionally, we're here on ScholaLatinae, right? Yes, I've learned how my background works. ScholaLatinae literally means the school of Latin. And if you go to the About Us page, I'm listed as a senior instructor, head instructor. And so let's look at all of these. School is interesting. This is actually ultimately from Greek skole. Forgive me again, I do not actually know that much Greek. But it's interesting because that word originally meant leisure, right? And so you think Greeks back in that time, there's a lot of philosophy going on, right? A lot of talking. People like to talk about what they were thinking, and they like to do it in their spare time. And so you have this spare time, but then that word gets applied to things that you're talking about in your spare time. But then, if you want to all come together to one place to talk about ideas, to talk about philosophy and religion and mathematics and the arts, then what you're doing is you're going to a school, and so that's where that word, how that derives from scole. Latin is of course from Latinus, which means Latin, and there's the region around Rome is Latium in Italy. It's Lazio right now, and that is possibly from a root meaning like flat country. If you think there's the Latin word latus, which is wide, right? Although it's really unclear. There's a folk etymology that connects it to lateo, which means to lie hidden, right? There's some myth about Saturn or something, but we're really not sure. Instructor, let me preemptively move my camera. Instructor is really you are building upon something, and the something that you're building are instructional topics, right? Educational topics and knowledge. And so really even when you go to school, you're kind of building on the things you already know, and that's what an instructor does. And that's what I hope I'm doing with these videos, building upon your knowledge of Latin and etymology. And so etymology, if you're familiar with the JCL, or even if you're not, you might also be familiar with this thing called certamen. And certamen means competition in Latin. And it is a quiz bowl style of competition focused on Latin language and Greco-Roman mythology and Roman history and eventually Latin literature. And so in the Latin language category, you have various kinds of questions, such as translation questions, vocab questions, grammar questions, and one of the questions you have is about etymology. And there are a couple different ways that they could ask etymology questions. So I have 3 real questions here from the 2022 NJCL novice questions, which novice is Latin 1. And so the first one is asking what English word derived from a Latin word for door is a person employed as a caretaker of a building. And so this is where they're giving you some definition, and they say, what's the English word? And so some of you might know it. You can say janitor or porter. Janitor is from Janua, which means door, and porter is from porta, which is door or gate. Another kind of question they might ask here, it's which of the following is not derived from the same root? And here they give you a list of words. So efficient, faith, munificence, and faction. In fact, the answer is faith. The other 3 all come from facio, which means to do. Faction, we actually mentioned earlier, is a doublet of fashion. Efficient also is from ex, meaning out of. Munificence is also from munus, meaning gift. And faith ultimately derives from fides, which means faith, related to fido, which is to trust. And so it doesn't belong with the other words there. And the last kind of question you might see is like asking for the actual root here. So the root of indoctrinate and doctor is dokeo, which means to teach. Originally a doctor, nowadays we often think like a medical doctor, but originally a doctor is just any sort of learned individual who has been taught a lot of things. And of course, indoctrinate is really the extreme version of teaching, as sort of brainwashing kind of thing. But they are both ultimately from dokeo, to teach. And so you can find a lot of examples of these sorts of questions online. And a good resource that you can use to even make your own questions is Etymonline. Oh, that's not sorry. Etymonline is the online etymology dictionary, as I mentioned, and I encourage you give it a shot. Try to write your own etymology questions. You can use any of these sorts of questions as guides. Either ask for an English word based off of its meaning and derivation, or ask to say which of the following, or try to get the actual root word there, like we have in the last one. But just give it a shot, because some etymologies are really, really fascinating, I think. There's a lot of fun to be had, for me at least, in researching. My favorite etymology is probably the derivative one, which we mentioned earlier on, where there's a lot of philosophical, poetical things you can do with that, of just going down this etymological river. I love it. In any case, that has been our introduction to etymology. Here we have fin, which is French for the end. It is from Latin finis, meaning end. Also, we get final, infinite, and everything. And I hope that these videos will be infinitely forthcoming, and that you are learning a lot. And I, of course, thank you again for being with me here as we learned about etymology, the study of truth. And I hope to see you again on another video here at ScholaLatinae. Valete omnes.